Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Raven's Readings. I'll be reading from the Adventures of Tom Sawyer, published in 1876 by Mark Twain. It's set in 1840 along the Mississippi River near the town of Hannibal, where Twain grew up. I do readings twice a week, Tuesdays and Fridays, and we've only got 3 weeks left of this story. If you subscribe to my Substack newsletter, you'll get notified of my updates as soon as they're ready. If you enjoy this reading or have other classics you'd like to hear, leave me a comment. In the last chapters, Tom wrestled with his conscience and finally testified against Injun Joe. Then the murderer escaped from court. Hopefully is gone for good. Chapter 25. There comes a time in every rightly constructed boy's life when he has a raging desire to go somewhere and dig for hidden treasure. This desire suddenly came upon Tom one day. He sallied out to find Joe Harper, but failed of success. Next he sought Ben Rogers, and he'd gone fishing. Presently he stumbled upon Huck Finn the Red-Handed. Huck would answer. Tom took him to a private place and opened the matter to him confidentially. Huck was willing. Huck was always willing to take a hand in any enterprise that offered entertainment and required no capital, for he had a troublesome superabundance of that sort of time, which is not money. "Where'll we dig?" said Huck. "Oh, most anywhere." "Why, is it hid all around?" "No, indeed it ain't. It's hid in mighty particular places, Huck. Sometimes on islands, sometimes in rotten chests under the end of a limb of an old dead tree, just where the shadow falls at midnight, but mostly under the floor in haunted houses." "Who hides it?" "Why, robbers, of course," said Tom. "Well, what do you figure? Sunday school superintendents?" "Oh, I don't know. If it was mine, I wouldn't hide it. I'd spend it, have a good time." "Well, so would I, but robbers don't do that way. They always hide it and leave it there." "Don't they come after it anymore?" "No, Huck. They think they will, but they generally forget the marks or else they die, and anyway, it lays there a long time and gets rusty, and by somebody finds an old yellow paper that tells how to find the marks. A paper that's got to be ciphered over about a week because it's mostly signs and hieroglyphics." "Hiero who?" "Hieroglyphics, pictures and things, that don't seem to mean anything." "Have you got one of them papers, Tom?" "No." "Well, then how are you going to find the marks?" "No, I don't want any marks," said Tom. "They're always buried it under a haunted house or on an island or under a dead tree that's got one limb sticking out. Well, we've tried Jackson's Island a little, and we can try it again sometime. And there's the old haunted house up by the Stillhouse branch, and there's a lot of dead limb trees, dead loads of them." "Is it under all of them?" "How you talk. No." "Now how are you going to know which one to go for?" "Oh, go for all of them." "Why, Tom, it'll take all summer." "Oh, well, what of that? Suppose you find a brass pot with $100 in it, all rusty and gray, or a rotten chest full of diamonds. How's that?" Huck's eyes glowed. "Well, that's bully, pretty bully enough for me. Just you give me the $100. I don't want no diamonds." "All right, but I bet you I ain't going to throw off on diamonds. Some of 'em's worth $20 apiece. There ain't any hardly but worth 6 bits or $1. "No, is that so?" "Certainly. Anybody tell you so. Ain't you ever seen one, Huck?" Not as I remember." "Oh, kings have slathers of them." "Well, I don't know no kings, Tom." "Oh, I reckon you don't, but if you was to go to Europe, you see a raft of 'em hopping about." "Do they hop?" "Hop your granny, no." "Well, what'd you say they did for?" "Oh, shucks, I only meant that you'd seen them, and not hopping, of course. What do they want to hop for? But I mean, you'd just see them scattered around, in a kind of general way. Like that old humpback Richard." "Richard? What's his other name?" "He didn't have any other name. Kings don't have any but a given name." "No?" "Well, they don't." "Well, if they like it, Tom, all right, but I don't want to be a king and have only just a given name like a nigger. Say, where are you going to dig first?" "Well, I don't know. Suppose we tackle that old dead limb tree on the hill to the other side of Stillhouse Branch." "I'm agreed." So they got a crippled pick and a shovel and set out on their 3-mile tramp. They arrived hot and panting and threw themselves down in the shade of a neighboring elm to rest and have a smoke. "I like this," said Tom. "Well, so do I. Say, Huck, if we find a treasure here, what are you going to do with your share?" "Well, I'll have pie and a glass of soda every day, and I'll go to every circus that comes along. I'll bet I'll have a gay time." "Aren't you going to save any of it?" "Save it? For what?" "Well, so as to something to live on by and by." "Oh, that ain't no use, Tom. Pap will come back to this here town some day and get his claws on it if I didn't hurry up, and I tell you he'd clean it out pretty quick. What are you going to do with yourn, Tom?" "I'm going to buy a new drum and a sure enough sword and a red necktie and a bullpup and get married." "Married?" "That's it." "Tom, what? You ain't in your right mind." "Oh, wait, you'll see." "Well, that's the foolishest thing you could do. Look at Pap and my mother. Fight? Why, they used to fight all the time. I remember mighty well." "That ain't anything. The girl I'm going to marry won't fight." "Tom, I reckon they're all alike. They'll all comb a body. Now, you better think about it this while. I tell you better. What's the name of the gal?" "It ain't a gal at all. It's a girl." "Oh, it's all the same, I reckon. Some saying gal, some saying girl. Both right enough. And anyway, what's her name, Tom?" "I'll tell you sometime. Not now." "All right, that'll do. Only if you get married, I'll be more lonesomer than ever." "Oh, no, you won't. You'll come and live with me. And now stir out of this, and we'll go digging." Well, they worked and sweated for half an hour. No result. They toiled another half hour. Still no result. Huck said, "Do they always bury it as deep as this?" "Well, sometimes. Not always. Well, not generally. I reckon we haven't got the right place." So they chose a new spot and began again. The labor dragged a little, but still they made progress. They picked away in silence for some time. Finally, Huck leaned on his shovel and swabbed the beaded drops from his brow with his sleeve and said, "Oh, where are you going to dig next after we get this one?" "Well, I reckon maybe we'll tackle the old tree that's over yonder in Cardiff Hill, back of the widow's." "Well, I reckon that'll be a good one. Won't the widow take it away from us, Tom? It's on her land." "She take it away? Maybe she'd like to try it once. Whoever finds one of those hid treasures, it belongs to him. Don't make any difference whose land it's on." And that was satisfactory. The work went on, and by Huck said, "Blame it, we must be in the wrong place again. What do you think?" "Oh, it is mighty curious, Huck. I don't understand it. Sometimes witches interfere. I reckon maybe that's what's the trouble now." "Well, shucks, witches ain't got no power in the daytime." "Well, that's so. I didn't think of that. Oh, I know what the matter is. What a blame lot of fools we are. You got to find out where the shadow of the limb falls at midnight. That's where you dig." "Oh, then confound it, we fooled away all this work for nothing. Now, hang it all, we got to come back in the night. It's an awful long way. Can you get out?" "I bet I will, Huck. We've got to do it tonight, too, because if somebody sees these holes, they'll know in a minute what's here, and they'll go for it." "Well, I'll come round and meow tonight." "All right, let's hide the tools in the bushes." The boys were there that night, about the appointed time. They sat in the shadow waiting. It was a lonely place, and an hour made solemn by old traditions. Spirits whispered in the rustling leaves. Ghosts lurked in the murky nooks. The deep baying of a hound floated up out of the distance, and owl answered with this sepulchral note. The boys were subdued by these solemnities and talked little. By and by they judged that 12 had come. They marked where the shadow fell and began to dig. Their hopes commenced to rise. Their interest grew stronger, and their industry kept pace with it. And the hole deepened and still deepened, but every time their hearts jumped to hear the pick strike upon something, they only suffered a new disappointment. It was only a stone or a chunk. At last Tom said, "It ain't no use, Huck. We're wrong again." "Oh, but we can't be wrong. We spotted the shatter to a dot." "I know it, but then there's another thing." "What's that?" "Well, we only guessed at the time. Like enough it was too late or too early." Huck dropped his shovel. "That's it," he said. "That's the very trouble. Oh, we've got to give this one up. We can't ever tell the right time, and besides, this kind of thing's too awful. Here this time of night with witches and ghosts a flutting around so. I feel as if something's behind me all the time, and I'm afeard to turn around because maybe there's others in front of waiting for a chance. I've been creeping all over ever since I got here. Well, I've been pretty much so too, Huck. They most always put in a dead man when they bury a treasure near a tree to look out for it. Lordy! Well, yes, they do. I've always heard that. Oh, Tom, I don't like to fool around much where there's dead people. The body's bound to get into trouble with them, sure. I don't like to stir them up either. Suppose this one here was to stick his skull out and say something. Oh, don't, Tom, that's awful. Well, it just is. Huck, I don't feel comfortable a bit. Oh, say, Tom, let's give this place up and try somewhere else. I reckon we better. Well, what'll it be? Tom considered a while and then said, The haunted house, that's it. Oh, blame it, I don't like haunted houses, Tom. Why, they're a darn sight worse than dead people. Dead people might talk, maybe, but they don't come sliding around in a shroud and you ain't noticing and peep over your shoulder all of a sudden and grit their teeth the way a ghost does. I couldn't stand such a thing as that, Tom. Nobody could. Yes, but ghosts don't travel around only at night. They won't hinder us from digging there in the daytime. Well, that's so. But you know mighty well people don't go about that haunted house in the day or the night. Well, that's mostly because they don't like to go where a man's been murdered anyway, but nothing's ever been seen round that house except in the night. Just some blue lights slipping by the windows. No regular ghosts. Well, Tom, where you see one of them blue lights flicking around, you can bet there's a ghost mighty close behind it. It stands to reason. Because you know that they don't anybody but ghosts use them. Well, that's so. But anyway, they don't come around in the daytime. What's the use of our being afeard? Well, all right, we'll tackle the haunted house if you say so, but I reckon it's taking chances. They'd started down the hill by this time. There in the middle of the moonlit valley below them stood the haunted house, utterly isolated, its fences gone long ago, rank weeds smothering the very doorsteps. The chimney crumbled to ruin, the window sashes vacant, a corner of the roof caved in. The boys gazed a while, half expecting to see a blue light flit past the window. Then, talking in a low tone, as befitted the time and circumstances, they struck far off to the right to give the haunted house a wide berth and took their way homeward through the trees that adorned the rearward side of Cardiff Hill. End of chapter. Chapter 26. About noon the next day, the boys arrived at the dead tree they'd come for their tools. Tom was impatient to go to the haunted house, and Huck was measurably so also, but suddenly said, Oh, looky here, Tom. Do you know what day it is? Tom mentally ran over the days of the week and then quickly lifted his eyes with a startled look at him. My, I never thought of it, Huck. Well, I didn't neither, but all at once it popped on me. It's Friday. Blame it, a body can't be too careful, Huck. We might have got into an awful scrape tackling such a thing on a Friday. Might. Better say we would. There's some lucky days, maybe, but Friday ain't. Why, any fool knows that. I don't reckon you was the first that found it out, Huck. Well, I never said I was, did I? And Friday ain't all, neither. I had a rotten bad dream last night. Dreamt about rats. No, sure sign of trouble. Did they fight? No. Well, that's good, Huck. When they don't fight, it's only a sign there's trouble around, you know. All we got to do is look mighty sharp and keep out of it. We'll drop this thing today and play. Do you know Robin Hood, Huck? No, who's Robin Hood? Why, he is one of the greatest men that was ever in England, and the best. He was a robber. Oh, cracky, I wish I was. Who'd he rob? Only sheriffs and bishops and rich people and kings and such like, but he never bothered the poor. He loved them. He always divided up with them perfectly square. Well, he must have been a brick. Oh, I bet you he was, Huck. Oh, he was one of the noblest men there ever was. There ain't any such man, no, I can tell you. He could lick any man in England with one hand tied behind him, and he could take his yew-bow and plug a 10-cent piece every time, a mile and a half. What's a yew-bow? I don't know. It's some kind of bow, of course. And And if he'd hit that dime only on the edge, oh, he'd sit down and cry and curse, but we'll play Robin Hood. It's nobby fun. I'll learn you. Well, I'm agreed. So they played Robin Hood all the afternoon, and now and then casting a yearning eye down upon the haunted house and passing a remark about the morrow's prospects and possibilities there. As the sun began to sink into the west, they took their way homeward athwart the long shadows of the trees, and soon were buried from sight in the forests of Cardiff Hill. On Saturday, shortly before noon, the boys were at the dead tree again. They had a smoke and a chat in the shade, and then dug a little in their last hole, not with a great hope, but merely because Tom said there were so many cases where people had given up a treasure after getting down within 6 inches of it, and then somebody else had come along and turned it up with a single thrust of a shovel. Well, the thing failed this time, however, so the boys shouldered their tools and went away feeling that they had not trifled with fortune, but had fulfilled all the requirements that belonged to the business of treasure hunting. When they reached the haunted house, there was something so weird and grisly about the dead silence that reigned there under the baking sun, and something so depressing about the loneliness and desolation of the place that they were afraid for a moment to venture in. Then they crept to the door and took a trembling peep. They saw a weed-grown, floorless room, unplastered, an ancient fireplace, vacant windows, a ruinous staircase, and here, there, and everywhere hung ragged and abandoned cobwebs. They presently entered, softly with quickened pulses, talking in whispers, ears alert to catch the slightest sound, and muscles tense and ready for instant retreat. In a little while, familiarity modified their fears, and they gave the place a critical and interesting examination, rather than admiring their own boldness, and wondered at it too. Next, they wanted to look upstairs. This was something like cutting off retreat, but they got to daring each other, and of course there could be only one result. They threw their tools into a corner and made the ascent. Up there were the same signs of decay. In one corner they found a closet that promised mystery, but the promise was a fraud. There was nothing in it. Their courage was up now and well in hand. They were about to go down and begin work when, "Shh," said Tom. "What is it?" whispered Huck, blanching with fright. "Shh, there. Hear it?" "Oh, yes. Oh, my, let's run." "Oh, keep still. Don't you budge. They're coming right toward the door." The boys stretched themselves upon the floor with their eyes to knotholes in the planking and lay waiting in a misery of fear. "Oh, they've stopped. No coming. Oh, here they are. Don't whisper another word, Huck. My goodness, I wish I was out of this." 2 men entered. Each boy said to himself, "There's the old deaf and dumb Spaniard that's been about town once or twice lately. Never saw the other man before." The other was a ragged, unkempt creature with nothing very pleasant in his face. The Spaniard was wrapped in a serape. He had bushy white whiskers, and long white hair flowed from under a sombrero, and he wore green goggles. When they came in, the other was talking in a low voice. They sat down on the ground, facing the door, with their backs to the wall, and the speaker continued his remarks. His manner became less guarded, and his words more distinct as he proceeded. "No," said he, "I've thought it all over. I don't like it. It's dangerous." "Dangerous," grunted the deaf and dumb Spaniard, to the vast surprise of the boys. "Milksop." This voice made the boys gasp and quake. It was Injun Joe's. There was silence for some time, and then Joe said, "What's any more dangerous than that job up yonder? Nothing's come of it." "Oh, that's different. Away up the river so, and not another house about. 'Twon't ever be known that we tried, anyway, as long as we didn't succeed." "Well, what's more dangerous than coming here in the daytime? Anybody with suspicion us that saw us." "I know that, but there weren't any other places handy after that fool of a job. I want to quit this shanty. I wanted to yesterday. It weren't any use trying to stir out here with those infernal boys playing over there on the hill right in full view." Those infernal boys quaked again under the inspiration of this remark, and thought how lucky it was that they had remembered it was Friday and concluded to wait another day. They wished in their hearts they'd waited a year. The 2 men got out some food and made a luncheon. After a long and thoughtful silence, Injun Joe said, "Look here, lad. You go back up the river where you belong. Wait there till you hear from me. I'll take the chances on dropping into this town just once more for a look. We'll do that dangerous job after I've spied around a little, think things look well for it. Then for Texas, we'll leg it together." This was satisfactory. Both men presently fell to yawning, and Injun Joe said, "I'm dead for sleep. It's your turn to watch." He curled down in the weeds and soon began to snore. His comrade stirred him once or twice, and it became quiet. Presently the watcher began to nod, and his head drooped lower and lower. Both men began to snore now. The boys drew a long, grateful breath. Tom whispered, "Oh, now's our chance. Come." Huck said, "Oh, I can't. I'd die if they was to wake." Tom urged. Huck held back. At last Tom rose slowly and softly and started alone. But the first step he made wrung such a hideous creak from the crazy floor that he sank down almost dead with fright. He never made a second attempt. The boys lay there counting the dragging moments till it seemed to them that time must be done and eternity growing gray, and then were grateful to note that at last the sun was setting. Now one more snore ceased. Injun Joe sat up, stared around, smiled grimly upon his comrade, whose head was drooping upon his knees, and stirred him up with his foot and said, "Here, you're a watchman, aren't you? All right, though, nothing's happened." "My, have I been asleep?" "Oh, partly. Nearly time for us to be moving, pard. What'll we do with what little swag we've got left?" "I don't know. Leave it here as we've always done, I reckon. No use to take it away till we start south. 650 in silver's something to carry." "Well, all right. It won't matter to come here once more." "No, but I'd say come in the night as we used to. It's better." "Well, yeah, but look here. It may be a good while before I get the right chance at that job. Accidents might happen. 'Tain't in such a very good place. We'll just regularly bury it, and bury it deep." "Good idea," said the comrade, who walked across the room, knelt down, raised one of the rearward hearthstones, and took out a bag that jingled pleasantly. He subtracted from it $20 or $30 for himself, and as much for Injun Joe, and passed the bag to the latter, who was on his knees in the corner, now digging with his bowie knife. The boys forgot all their fears, all their miseries in an instant. With gloating eyes they watched every moment. Luck, the splendor of it was beyond all imagination. $600 was money enough to make half a dozen boys rich. Here was treasure hunting under the happiest auspices. There would not be any bothersome uncertainty as to where to dig. They nudged each other every moment, eloquent nudges and easily understood, for they simply meant, "Oh, but ain't you glad now we're here?" Joe's knife struck upon something. "Hello," he said. "What is it?" said his comrade. "Oh, a half-rotten plank. No, it's a box, I believe. Bear a hand and we'll see what it's here for. Oh, never mind, it broke a hole." He reached his hand in and drew out, "Man, it's money." The two men examined the handful of coins. They were gold. The boys above were as excited as themselves and as delighted. Joe's comrade said, "Well, we'll make quick work of this. There's an old rusty pick over amongst the leaves on the corners, the other side of the fireplace. I saw it a minute ago." He ran and brought the boys' pick and shovel, and Injun Joe took the pick and looked it over critically, shook his head, muttered something to himself, and then began to use it. The box was soon unearthed. It was not very large. It was iron-bound and had been very strong before the slow years had injured it. The men contemplated the treasure a while in blissful silence. "Pard, there's thousands of dollars here," said Injun Joe. "Oh, 'twas always said that Merle's gang used to be around here one summer," the stranger observed. "I know it," said Injun Joe, "and this looks like it, I most should say." "Now you won't need to do that other job." The half-breed frowned. Said he, "You don't mean, at least you don't know all about that thing. 'Tain't robbery altogether, it's revenge." And a wicked light flamed in his eyes. "I need your help in it. When it's finished, then Texas. Go home to your Nance and your kids and stand by till you hear from me." "Well, if you say so, what'll we do with this? Bury it again?" "Yes." Ravishing delight overhead. "Oh, no, by the great Sachem, no." Profound distress overhead. "I'd nearly forgot. That pick had fresh earth on it." The boys were sick with terror in a moment. "What business has a pick and shovel here? What business with fresh earth on them? Who brought them here and where have they gone? Have you heard anybody, seen anybody? What, buried again and leave them to come and see the ground disturb? Not exactly. We'll take it to my den. Oh, of course. Might have thought of that before. You mean number 1? No, number 2, under the cross. The other place is bad, too common. All right, it's nearly dark enough to start. Injun Joe got up and went about from window to window, cautiously peeping out. Presently he said, "Who could have brought these tools here? Do you reckon they can be upstairs?" The boy's breath forsook them. Injun Joe put his hand on his knife, halted a moment undecided, and then turned toward the stairway. The boys thought of the closet, but their strength was gone. The steps came creaky up the stairs. The intolerable distress of the situation woke the stricken resolution of the lads. They were about to spring for the closet when there was a crash of rotten timbers, and Injun Joe landed on the ground amid the debris of the ruined stairway. He gathered himself up, cursing, and his comrade said, "Oh, no, what's the use of all that? Well, if it's anybody and they're up there, let them stay there. Who cares? If they want to jump down now and get into trouble, who objects? It'll be dark in 15 minutes, then let them follow us if they want to. I'm willing. In my opinion, whoever hauled those things in here caught a sight of us and took us for ghosts or devils or something. I bet they're running yet." Joe grumbled a while, and then he agreed with his friend that whatever daylight was left ought to be economized in getting things ready for leaving. Shortly afterward, they slipped out of the house in the deepening twilight and moved toward the river with the precious box. Tom and Huck rose up, weak but vastly relieved, and stared after them through the chinks between the logs of the house. Follow? Oh, not they. They were content to reach ground again without broken necks and take the townward track over the hill. They did not talk much. They were too much absorbed in hating themselves, hating the ill luck that made them take the spade and the pick there. But for that, Injun Joe never would have suspected. He would have hidden the silver with the gold to wait there till his revenge was satisfied. Then he would have had the misfortune to find that money turn up missing. Bitter luck that the tools had ever been brought there. They resolved to keep a lookout for that Spaniard when he should come to town spying out for chances to do his revengeful job and follow him to number 2, wherever that might be. Then a ghastly thought occurred to Tom. Revenge. What if he means us, Huck? Oh, don't, said Huck, nearly fainting. They talked it all over, and as they entered town, they agreed to believe that he might possibly mean somebody else, at least that he might at least mean nobody but Tom, since only Tom had testified. Very, very small comfort it was to Tom to be alone in danger. Company would have been a palpable improvement, he thought. End of chapter. Well, good news. The boys might be able to track down that treasure under the cross. Bad news, Injun Joe is back. Remember to let me know what your preferences are for readings. If you subscribe to my newsletter, you'll get notified of my updates as soon as they're ready. If you enjoy this reading or have other classics you'd like to hear, leave me a comment. Check out my other posts on my Substack at ravensview.substack.com, and remember to share this with your friends. Ta-ta for now.